Welcome to the Moksa Workflow Manager training movie. This is the second training movie for this exercise. If you haven't had the chance to take a look at the first one called Checkup, please do it first so that you are sure that everything is set up correctly. In this second movie, we will create a new workflow, and I will talk a bit about the different parts of the Workflow Manager. Workflows are built inside the Cumulus client, and you can only build these workflows with the eJAP that you installed. If you installed it correctly, you will have an extra menu item in your Cumulus client. Open the $Workflows catalog using the Cumulus administrator. You should only use the Cumulus administrator to build workflows. You will notice that in this catalog there is one tab under the categories called $templates, and there is one root category called Workflow Portal. We will create templates under the $templates category, and you can give them freely a name. That name will be displayed inside your workflow portal when you are selecting the workflow. When workflows are running, they will automatically be created under this workflow portal tab. That means that you never have to or should touch anything that is created underneath the workflows portal. A workflow consists of two parts. It's completely integrated in Cumulus, so the workflow container is a category with a name and with several fields that we can set up, in which we can personalize the functionalities of a workflow. And every individual task in a workflow is actually a record. We are not going to build workflows just like this. You will use the workflow graph to create workflows. So whenever you want to go to a workflow to modify its behavior, their functionalities, the task, you will always select the category and you will click on Open Workflow Graph. And at that point you can see the workflow. A workflow has different parts. This part is the user list or swim lane. This is where you define which are the users or which are the roles that are participating in this workflow. This is an example with one swim lane. Here is another example where you have several swim lanes, two in this case. A workflow can have multiple steps. You can always see the name of the workflow task at the bottom, unless you click here, and then you only see the names that you typed in for the individual tasks. The different workflow steps can be different workflow tasks can be different types of tasks that perform or ask you to perform different kinds of actions. Every task is connected to a next task with what we call an outlet, and depending on the kind of task you can have different outlets. In a commission task you can have uploaded and provided. In an approval task you can have approved, rejected, approved with changes. So depending on the type of task you can go from one task to the other by connecting them through their outlets. Whatever functionality is available for these tasks and swim lanes and users is always shown here at the bottom. So if you select a swim lane, you will be able to do something about this user list. If you select the user list, you will be able to add a new task to this new user list. And so these functionalities are available from within your workflow graph. So you can always zoom in and zoom out to have a better view on your screen. And if you are coming back from another task, you can always click in the area next to the tasks, and you will have a refresh button which will redraw the screen if anything is not showing properly. Let's start with creating a new workflow. Creating a new workflow means that I'm creating a new category, and I'm going to call this my training -1 first workflow. You should not use colons or slashes or backslashes or special characters in the name of those categories, because at some point in the workflow they might cause something to be shown different or behave differently than you expect. I created a category, and now I open the workflow graph, and at the top I get a message that says first create a user group, then select it and create a new task. So I first go to this button and I select the first task. The workflow I'm going to create is a very simple approval task. I'm going to provide files, for instance a new design, and I'm going to send this to somebody for approval. Let's say in this example that somebody from the design department has a new design. They will upload it into the workflow portal, and then this will automatically be sent to somebody of marketing, and marketing will verify if this file is okay. So I'm clicking here, I'm selecting the department, I can see my users, but if I want the person who starts the workflow to be able to select from a group of users from the marketing, I'm not going to select an individual user, I'm just going to select the role. In case you don't have roles and only work with users, then you will not get the role list, but only get the user list to choose from. So I'm clicking on save, and I'm going back to my task. I can see now that I have my swim lane, and I can click here. I select it, and as soon as I select it, I get the opportunity to add a new workflow task. You now get a complete list of all the installed tasks for your workflow, and in this first example I'm going to start with an approval task. An approval task is a task in which a user gets in his web interface files offered. He can download them, he can preview them, get Cumulus information, all the standard functionalities of sites, and then he can decide that he approves, rejects the file in that particular task. So I'm going to call this approve design. The name of the workflow will appear in this builder, but it will also appear in the workflow itself, in the workflow task itself. So it's useful to use proper names. So in this case I'm giving it task name and title the same thing, and then you can add any instructions. These are generic instructions, and we are building a template which will be used over and over again for approval processes. So we will give a generic description of what is expected from this user in this task. When you start a workflow, you will have the opportunity to specify more detailed information, instruction of what is expected from the user in this workflow. So I'm going to keep this simple. You see that in some of these fields we have what we call placeholders. So some of the content of what is displayed here in the workflow can be dynamic, can be automatically filled in once the workflow starts. So to be able to use that, we have here for instance, a placeholder called workflow name. You can find that information inside the manual, but you can also find this information in the hint. As soon as you do an on mouse over on this, you automatically get a hint with all the different titles, with all the different placeholders that you can use. So one is, for instance, workflow name. Another one is what we can see here is percentage link percentage. That means that it will automatically generate a URL that will appear in the email body of the mail that is sent, and when the user clicks on it, it will open the user's task. So that is what that placeholder does. I can add, for instance, another one. I can say, maybe I want the title that I'm using here, maybe I want to have the title appear as well. So I'm adding title. So now I am sure that whoever it gets this mail also gets the title of this workflow. I could add a lot of other stuff. For instance, I could add the instructions that you type into your task. You could specify those as well here, so that the user can easily use that information and get that information right in the mail. But we're going to keep it simple. You do not have to specify an email from. If you don't specify an email from, it will automatically take the email from that was defined in the preferences earlier on. You can have an administrator automatically notified whenever this task starts, whenever this task is performed, or whenever this task is delayed. Or you could deactivate that, and in that case it will not send that email. So that admin user here is by default the Cumulus administrator. So if you let it to the Cumulus administrator, set it to the Cumulus administrator or leave it empty, it will not send an email because the Cumulus administrator does not have a real email address. Watch out, there's a second part to this task, which is the advanced part, and which is the most elaborate part of the task to set up. In this first example, we're not going to explain all the functionalities, but basically you are allowing the user to either do a veto, or if there are multiple people in the same swim lane and the first one that rejects will reject the asset completely. Majority, so where there will be a majority count for voting for the assets, or single user is actually the same thing as veto, but for one user. If you are a single user, you are also allowed to approve with changes, which gives you, instead of two options, approve and reject, gives you a third option, a third outlet, a third branch outside the workflow. You can force people to comment if they reject. You can force people to comment when they approve with changes. You can set a minimum amount that they have, percentage that they have to approve, or a maximum. If you leave all this to the default, it will work perfectly. You can set an additional email address for an admin on top of this one to get an email when this task is performed. When all these parameters are set, you can decide what is shown on the buttons. So approve button text could be approved, but it could also be sent to legal, or reject could be sent back to design. So all these functionalities are available. When I added my task, you will see that it is now available in my workflow graph. The next step is to decide what happens with the files that are approved or rejected in this workflow. In this example, we're going to keep it very simple. I'm going to create a collection task. A collection task is a task that creates a sites collection and emails a link to that sites collection to a user. So I'm going to call this approved design. And I'm going to enable the fact that it's a sites collection, and I allow the users who open this sites collection to download, preview, and show information in the info window. Again, I'm going to use approved design collection, use the same title. You see the placeholders that I've talked about before. You can use placeholders in these different fields. So, and you can specify the email. Again, here you have the link. There is also the option to use client link, which means that it creates a links for the Cumulus client. If you want to use this, you have to make sure that your Cumulus scheduler that your Cumulus scheduler is running with the Cumulus IP address of the server and not just localhost, because localhost, for instance, is not the correct IP address that will be used from the client user's computer. So make sure to specify the IP address or DNS name. Another thing which is very important is that the scheduler should always run with the Cumulus administrator password, login and password, not another user, because the workflow manager task needs access to the user authentication of Cumulus, and that is only running properly with the Cumulus administrator. So we quickly created this task. When we go to our workflow graph, we see that we now have two tasks. Of course, we don't want these tasks to be executed simultaneously. We want from the approval task that the outlet, I'm clicking on outlet of the approved assets, goes to that task. I could create another create collection task for the rejected ones, but for this very first workflow, this is the point where we stop. This workflow is now created, and now the final thing that we need to do is we need to set a few parameters that are mandatory for this workflow to be able to run it. As I mentioned in an earlier movie, you have imported, or you should have imported, a record view set and a category view set that is called workflow. If you select this category view set, you will get to see all the fields that are specific for the $workflows catalog. For this example, I'm just going to enable this portal template. This means that now the workflow is visible in the portal for any user that is allowed to access the workflow portal. Remember, that is done by the $workflow portal permission on that role or on that individual user if you're not using roles. Our workflow will in the portal need at least one file uploaded, because otherwise the approval task, which is the first task of this workflow, will not get any files to approve. So in the workflow portal, we are forcing our user to at least provide one file, one record, so that the workflow can use that file to approve. The other parameters will be discussed in a next training movie. I click on save, and from this moment on, this workflow will be visible in Sites. Thank you for joining me in this first demo movie. In the next movie, we will execute this workflow. We will start this workflow and we will run our first example.